Do you have a student with additional needs in your classroom? I'm very confident most of you will say yes. Hi everyone, welcome to Talk and Chalk. I'm Beck. I'm an assistant principal in Southwest Sydney, and today I'm going to be revisiting a topic that I did when I did a Twinkle live stream. It's about 2 or so weeks ago now. I've lost track, but it's only available on Facebook, and I've had people contact me saying that, they don't utilize Facebook. That's not the platform that they choose to use. And I think this is a really, really important topic, and I don't want people to miss out. So what I've done is I've just pulled out the notes that I used for that live stream event, and I'm just going to go through them again today. It won't take as long as what I did with the live stream, because that was also partly Q&A. And if you are part of that process, thank you for supporting me. You might get something different out of this if I suddenly think of something different, but otherwise please feel free to share this with people that you feel it might benefit. I'm going to be talking from, I guess, various perspectives when I do this. So I've mentioned in some of my other videos that I do have a degree in special needs education. I've got experience working in those settings, and I also have a son who was diagnosed with autism. So I guess I've got a bit of the both sides of the playing field experience in terms of talking to this topic. So before I get into it today, I'm just going to let everyone know that if you haven't subscribed to this channel, all my links and everything are below. If you do want to follow me on Facebook, that link is there as well in the description. And I don't sell or spam anything. I'm just sharing my experiences, tips and advice. It's not the be all end all. I don't think you have to do what I say. However, the things that I'm sharing are things that have been beneficial to me, or possibly the things that the people that I've worked with. So hopefully it helps some of you out there. I'm going to get stuck straight into it though, because this topic was quite large. So like I said, in terms of my experiences, I started teaching in 2003, and my first job was in an autism unit straight out of uni, and I went from one degree to the next while I was working. So I finished my Bachelor of Education Primary, and then I went into Bachelor of Special Needs Education, and I did special ed electives, which is what drew me to that area, and behaviour management, I suppose, was a main area, and then I kind of fell towards autism, mainly because that was just the needs that were presented in the schools that I had pracs on. So that was the area that I went into. However, I then moved into the mainstream setting, and I realized that those skills, the knowledge and skills that I had developed doing those degrees and the pracs and just the studies that go into it, really helped me in the mainstream setting. And I found that even in my first year, I had colleagues seeking out some advice and input from me based on the experiences that I had in other settings. So just having those experiences alone, I guess, gave me a bit of a leg up in the classroom in differentiating and managing high needs in the classroom. When you think of differentiation, I like the idea of going with different, not less. That's a key phrase for me. It's just different. It doesn't make them less able, and it always comes down to that individual on how they look upon themselves as to how they feel about their achievement and their progress and what they're working towards. So constantly different, not less. When you look at the history, sorry, I'm just looking down at my notes, I'm not trying to be rude. When you look at the history of differentiation, this is not a new term, this is not a new thing. Differentiation has been around since schooling started. Like, think back to the old schoolhouse that families or towns used to have, where there was that one teacher that was paid by the town to educate children, and it was just one schoolhouse, and the children that were in there were most often than not relatives, sisters, brothers, cousins, all living in that same town, related one way or another, or had grown up with each other one way or another. And it wasn't based on grades or ages. They were just in that one room, and the teacher had to accommodate as needed. The older child that had been ploughing fields for a lot longer was probably better at their arithmetic than the 5-year-old that had only just started helping dad on the farm. And they had to modify those things. And that was a whole different kind of culture back then. The kids were workers. They were already doing those things with the family. They were chopping wood to light the fire in the corner of the schoolhouse. They would probably bring oil along to help fuel the oil lamps. And they had to work on, slates. And there were different texts back then. There were different textbooks and things as well. Not quite the way they looked now, but they would share them. Or the 6-year-old and the 8-year-old could quite often be using the same thing, or 2 8-year-olds would be using different things because the teacher would just manage as needed. It wasn't until later on that we ended up going into grading schools. So this is when they started to create grades because, education was growing, cities were growing, it wasn't just the schoolhouse now, and they determined grades based on similar age of kids because they figured that, similar age meant similar abilities. And it wasn't until the early 20th century when we had achievement tests, it showed the gaps in the abilities of students of the same age. So we started to get these standardized tests in and realizing that the 2 8-year-olds had varying abilities, which brings us, all the way up to now. We're still using similar ages with grades. Some are taking on different stances now where we have stage classes, stage 2 or stage 3 are, mixed together in that class. And it's not about abilities or levels or ages. It can come down to varying things, and it depends on the culture and community of your school as well. So let's look at what differentiation actually means. I'm going to read this word for word that I've got on my page because this is just how I've viewed it, wording that I've put together from my studies and my experiences. So differentiation is a process that involves forward planning, programming, and instruction that provides for students with diverse needs in order to access and develop skills related to syllabus content and outcomes. The aim is to provide interrelated activities so all students can come to a similar grasp, skill, or understanding. What it's not separate, it's not different, and it's not unrelated. Very key words there. So, why do we differentiate? First and foremost, inclusion. There's so much diversity in our classrooms now, and that comes down to the cultural backgrounds, academic abilities, our physical abilities, economic factors, religion, racial, all of those things in there that mean that we have an extremely diverse classroom. And that doesn't always come down to our cognitive abilities in the classroom. We just want to be inclusive of everyone. We differentiate for so many different reasons in the classroom, and having high additional needs or any additional learning needs in the classroom is one of them. The second reason that we would is for support. It's for students, it's student-centric. Research shows that it helps with retention, it reduces the additional processing time needed for students to absorb information, it decreases the need for remediation, it allows learners to demonstrate their learning in various ways. So what can be differentiated? There's 3 things that I think you can focus on in terms of what you're going to differentiate. That's content, the process, and the product. So those 3 elements there. So when I talk about content, that's looking at the input. So that's, what the students are going to learn. The process is how they make sense of the ideas and information presented to them in the classroom. And then the product is the output. So that's how they demonstrate what they learn. And all those things can happen in different ways for each kid at different times. So the most successful differentiation occurs with quality planning. And this can be hard to, embrace because it means time. It means using up time. But there are 4 steps that you can use that I think that can really just keep this really focused. So 4 steps to planning differentiation. The first one is you need to ascertain the content or skill that you're working on. And that comes down to our syllabus and our content. The second thing is to gauge student background knowledge, which according to our curriculum we should be doing anyway. And there's even guides in most syllabus documents about what kind of background knowledge the children should have at that point. The third one is the one that really comes down to you as the teacher and what you can do. And that's selecting suitable instruction methods or materials. This is really, the nuts and bolts of what we're doing. And then number 4 is designing best assessment models. So, and there's many different assessment models out there. It's just about gauging what works for that student, what works for that content, and, the possible limitations you may have in the classroom to do that. But before you get too lost in too lost in all of that planning, I want you to consider the difference between low prep and high prep. So for example, open-ended activities is low prep because you can use them again and again. It allows students to find different results every time they do it, especially if they're using different resources, or if it's a math thing, use a different number and you'll get different results. and that just really allows them that openness to explore it over and over again, regardless of the grade, stage, age, content, lesson, whatever. However, having set rotation activities, with tiered activities like your low, your middle, your high, they're time consuming to make, and they really are only designed for minimal use. Those kids will use it once, maybe move to the next one, maybe move to the next one. Maybe they could revisit it again later to revise, but that's it. You then have to then store that and then make new stuff. So, and those things have their place. Those things are beneficial, but just in terms of your workload, I want you to think about what you're creating, what you're designing. Is it low prep? Is it high prep? How is it going to benefit you? How is it going to impact the kids? Differentiation can be very time consuming, so you need to make sure you're keeping a balance for yourself and for the students. Balance is the key. Your planning should take into account your classroom structure, so thinking of your furniture arrangements, is it open, is it flexible, can it be changed? Are your learning centers utilizing the learning modes in the classroom? Is it utilizing explicit, guided, collaborative, independent learning? Is the arrangement of, what is the arrangement of your instructional devices? So your iPads, computers, where are they located? How often are they going to be used? Does it impact anything else in the classroom? Is it easy for kids to work around it? Is it too noisy? Is it distracting for other kids that are near the computers? Organization of your learning time. So, break time is key for a lot of our kids with additional needs, making sure that they know how long they've got to work on something when they get a break. That break, even if those kids are on track doing really, really well, sometimes we don't know what's bubbling under the surface and how hard they're trying to stay on task. Giving them that little break is phenomenal. And I like to use GoNoodle for break time. If you haven't looked up GoNoodle, it's a free resource. Just log in with an account, you get a little avatar, and there's tons of stuff on there. MooseTube is my favorite. And then the structure of the communication between the teachers and students. Are you looking at whole class? Is it group? Is it individual? Is it partners? Are you using Google Classroom to communicate something? Does that need to be done in a different way for different kids? Sometimes it might mean having the visual resources to be able to communicate what's going on. So, beneficial things to include in your programming preparation really quickly. So your visual components, varied assessments, assistive technology, collaborative activities, cooperative learning, explicit modeling, feedback, use of graphic organizers, leveled materials, modified directions, a multisensory approach, peer instruction, and prior knowledge. You don't need to think of all of those things in terms of one lesson, one activity, one unit. Those are just an overarching thing that you can consider when planning and programming for different needs. So in terms of your classroom preparation, so your programming is one thing, thinking about your classroom structure is another thing, but the actual classroom prep, that's the day-to-day thing that's going to take up a lot of your time. So, I've just bumped that. In terms of your layout, so use the design thinking model to put yourself into the learner's shoes in the classroom and just empathize with that environment. So consider things like the lights, the noise, the colors around you, the space, any clutter that's around, smells, textures, and basically how does it feel to be in that environment. So for example, if you have a student that's on the spectrum that just can't handle the smell of, noodles cooking, if your classroom's near the canteen, you might want to keep the door closed or put them on the other side with the window open to the field or something where it's not going to smell as bad. Or at least at that particular time of day when the canteen is cooking, they might be doing something in a different space where that's not going to hinder their ability. And obviously you can't do that every single day. These are just things I want you to consider when you're planning things. Lights flickering is a big one. Our classrooms are quite often bright and open. That may mean having something like a tent with a torch so that at least if someone with those additional needs really needs to calm down and be centered, they have that space to do that. In terms of the resources in your classroom, these are the things that I like to have laminated ready for use. I don't like to have too many things laminated. One, it's just an excess of your workload to be laminating things every day, all the time, especially if it's not something you're going to reuse. Something that's a classroom display for a theme that I'm only using for 5 weeks or whatever, I'm not going to laminate that. unless it's something absolutely gorgeous, because I've done that in the past and I don't always go back and reuse them. I might reuse some, but every time I redo a unit again, I modify it, I change it, it's for a different grade, I found new pictures, something more interesting. So these are the things though that definitely I use repetitively, and some are looking really dingy because they've been used so often by the kids. So your graphic organizers, so anything that you could use like a Venn diagram or, you know, your Y chart, those things that you can use over and over and over again with a whiteboard marker, I have those laminated ready for use in a tub. Any of those anchor charts for support, so things like things that can go on your word wall, your, you know, times tables chart, or sight words, or I'm just trying to think of other ones that I had there now. You know, writing lines if they needed it, or a hundreds chart, and just basic number lines, so up to 10 or up to 20 or up to 50, those number lines, things that you just whip out at the drop of a hat to support something that's going on in the classroom, having those there. Your learning intentions and success criteria, I have those laminated just so I can write on whiteboard marker what that's going to be, or that can be slapped up onto a whiteboard and you can use the whiteboard to write down your learning intentions and success criteria. But having that label there that says what it is will always draw that attention back to the student to know that that's what they're doing every single time. Visual prompts in the classroom, so things like your daily schedule, your class timetable, the sessions throughout the day. There are some available that have clocks on it, so you can put the specific time that it's going to happen, or session segments, so, you know, morning, middle, afternoon. First and next cards, so this looks like a little box that has first and then an arrow and then next, so they know what the student's working towards. And usually when you're starting out, that's your reward. So first you're doing this, next you get your iPad and you have your reward, and then you branch it out. First spelling, and then you've got your arrow, then reading, then you've got reward, and you've got 3 there, and you can really stretch these out. And when I did this for Twinkle, they prompted with some links on there as well, so check out Twinkle Australia, because they've got lots of resources around this. If you go in and type in special needs, tons of stuff comes up. I used to wear a lanyard that had communication cards on it, so it was little things like yes, no, toilet, sit, no hitting, those sorts of things on a little laminated cards on a lanyard. And when I went into the mainstream setting, when I had students with diagnosed needs, I kept using them. I still use them. They were beneficial, especially if kids were going into a meltdown mode and wouldn't communicate. They get just non-verbal. Those visual prompts are very, very handy. Specific behavior expectations. So if you're doing 6, 5 or 6 L's in the classroom, have them up there visually, and then you can point to it just to reinforce what that means. And then just option choices. So if you've got those, you know, the choices for the kids to pick what they're going to do, having them visually around the classroom is beneficial. So your technology options like your iPad video, audio, whether it's cassette, CD, whatever you've actually got in your classroom technology wise, having those things stored in a way that makes it easy to access. If you've got a casual or whatever and they can't get to them, that's problematic. Obviously a lot of technology things need to be stored, but it shouldn't be at the back of a cupboard behind all of the books and everything, where it gets to the point where you're not actually accessing it readily. Independent activities to go. These things are great. So things like flashcards or games, and I get a lot of mine from just the reject shop, $2 reject shop, easy games, simple to do, because you can't always be with that student that has additional needs all day long. It's just not feasible. It's not doable. It's not going to happen. And anyone who has that expectation that you should be able to do that, it's just not being realistic in the classroom. However, what can happen is that when you're distracted with another student or a group or whatever, those kids will then go off the rails. Some play on it, some just get distracted, and some just find things too hard and then will retreat. So having something set up with independent activities means that they have something to go on with and can continue being independent and resilient and working towards a goal. And it's fine to partner them up with someone else in the classroom. Yes, those other kids probably should be doing something else at the time, but think of the social skills that they're developing, the leadership skills that they're developing, communication skills that they're all developing. There's always something there, I feel, that's beneficial to be had from that interaction in the classroom. Having concrete materials ready to go. So resources that I constantly use to differentiate in the classroom is always the whiteboard, Lego, blocks like counting blocks or the MAB blocks, counters, and magnetic letters. Having those ready to go all the time, because that just is a simple, easy resource that you can use to get hands-on with some kids that are struggling with anything, to reinforce something, or just to do it differently to engage them into the activity that you're working on. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping it up now. I want you to remember at the end of the day, working with any kind of particular need in the classroom, even if they're the standard kids in the class that are accessing the curriculum and maybe you want to push them a bit further, those are additional needs too. You should be reflecting on what you're doing, and obviously this needs to be down to how you feel you need to reflect. So it might not necessarily be on a particular lesson, it could just be on your behavior management throughout the day, or the tone of voice that you use throughout the day, or it could be reaching a particular, content marker. Debrief. This is so important to debrief. Meet with your team in the afternoon, your team teacher next door, a teacher who's not even on your stage that you can debrief with, or your supervisor. Some days go great. That's great. Some days go terrible, and that's fine too. Debrief on it though. Don't let it bottle up inside. If you've had a good day, share it. It feels great to go and share that stuff, because someone else might go, oh, I tried something similar to that and it didn't work. What did you do? Opens up the conversation there, and then you can really share that great dialogue. Feedback. Be open to feedback from other teachers, from your supervisors. Give feedback to someone else. Give feedback to parents. Those kids that are going home, if they've kept themselves together through the day, I can honestly tell you that kid might go home and have a meltdown from just trying to stay on the right track all day long. Feedback to the parent that they had a great day, the things that worked, because then that parent might go, hey, do you know what, that's really good. Let's go get a reward. Let's go get a milkshake or something. It just might help prevent that meltdown from happening at home, because kids feel safe at home. That's where it's going to happen. And it's not necessarily because they're, trying to hide who they are at school, as sometimes they just really want to impress their teachers. They want to do a good job as well. And if the day goes bad as well, feed that back to the parent as well, without feeding back that the child was bad, the day was bad, something specifically just didn't go right. And a lot of that comes down to the interaction we have with the parents, the language that we use, and the relationship that we build with them. You guys need to be a team with those parents, because that's just really the best platform that you can have to support those student needs, because ultimately you guys are working together for an entire year, possibly longer, to help support that student. That comes down to communication as well. Communicate. If there are issues, make sure that's communicated to the learning support team, to your supervisor. Document it somehow, because if there's a pattern and the school counsellor needs to come in, they're going to need to see what that pattern of behaviour or understanding or limitation is going to be. Be open and honest. Reflect on yourself and go, do you know what? That sucked today. That's okay. I'm going to use that as a learning opportunity and try something different tomorrow. So, but same thing if you do something great. I kicked at that. That was awesome. I did a really good job. I like the way that I did that. I'm going to go home and get myself a cookie. Be willing to change. And this is hard, because sometimes those methods you use in one class, you'll feel like should work really, really well in the next one, and then they don't. You have to be willing to reflect on that and go, I need to do something different. I need to change my approach. You might get feedback from someone who's come and watched you in a classroom doing a DEM lesson. You need to be willing to think of that feedback and decide, okay, I'm going to take that feedback on board and I'm going to change something, or I'm going to go, no, I think they've misinterpreted what's happening. I'm going to listen to your feedback, but I'm still going to stick with what I'm doing because I think it works. And then feedback again later. Collaborate. Don't do it on your own. Don't ever do it on your own. People keep saying things like, why reinvent the wheel when we collaborate? That's not what we're doing when we collaborate. When we collaborate, we're building things. We're building something great. We're not just restarting all over again. We're evolving the wheel. We're making sure things are better and changing and suited to those student needs. I'm not going to take some flat packed lesson and apply that to every class that I have. That's not responsive. It's not based on actual data or evidence or observations from my class. So you need to make sure that when you're collaborating, it's got a purpose. You're moving forward together. So when you do that, especially when you're doing that with your team, it helps you build consistent teacher judgment. It helps you build a whole understanding of those student needs in that level. And it means that you'll also recognize similar needs across your team, and that's when you can really work together to create something good. And even just sharing resources just reduces your workload so much. Remember, you're not alone. Especially our pre-service teachers. I think when you come into the system, or an early career teacher, when you're an early career teacher as well, and no matter how many times people say it to you, there's still that thing of, I don't want to tell anyone, I don't want anyone to think that I'm a failure, or I can't handle it, or that I don't know what I'm doing. There's still moments 16 years later where I go, I don't know what went wrong, I don't know what I'm doing on this one. And as new things come out, that's going to happen. I'm learning Minecraft at the moment. That's the big thing. I don't know much about that. My kids do, the students at my school do, but I don't. So I'm learning Minecraft. I need to be able to do that. And you need to be able to do that without fear of reprisal. There should be that open and honest conversation about, I want to learn to do better at something. And we're lifelong learners. We should be embracing that. And the last point that I've got, if all else fails, Google it. There are so many things that I have found on Google to help me. If I've typed in behavior management strategies, or if I've typed in things like students melting down in the classroom, or sensory resources, or how to make a timer, there's so much on there that other teachers have shared. There's teachers everywhere with blogs and vlogs and YouTube channels that are willing to share what works for them. Embrace it. They're out there so that we can share them. We've got, things like Teachers Pay Teachers and Pinterest and so many things out there, and you'll find it on Google, guaranteed. Don't be afraid to go on there and just type it away and see what else is done and try and use it as well, because, sharing is caring. That's how we all work together. Okay, I'm wrapping this up now because it's almost 30 minutes, and when I put this up on YouTube, it's going to be the first weekend of the school holidays for some teachers in my system. So hopefully you're just clicking save on this and watching it later. I'd like you to enjoy your holiday break. Make sure you get some rest and relaxation. If you have watched this though and you thought it was beneficial, I'd appreciate the thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, pop them below or send me a private message on Facebook or Twitter. I always get back to everyone who messages me, and I'm happy to talk to you. And I think I'm going to leave it there. So I'm going to put my button down here. So if you haven't subscribed, you can click on that and subscribe to the channel to get more videos. I'll put another random video at the top there, and I'm going to make an effort to make some extra videos over this holiday break, and I'll see you then. Thanks guys. Bye.